Hey, Don here. I'm back in the theater and I got the console set up. I did some programming and I went through and cleaned up some subgroups and matrix things and stuff like that. So today I want to talk about the flex mixes.
Oh yeah! Welcome to the show!
Each of these mixes over here, most of the PreSonus, all the new SE and most of the PreSonus mixers have 16 flex mixes. This 64S actually has 32. If I want to go on aux 1 or flex mix 1, I can do that. If I hit that button again, it goes to 17. The thing I want to talk about with flex mixes is they can be either an auxiliary, they can be a subgroup, or a submaster is kind of the way I'd prefer to call it, or a matrix. And every time that I see videos on this subject, they talk about what they are, but they really don't give you real world examples of how to use them and what you should use these for. The most common, obviously, is auxiliaries. And since I've got auxiliary 1 or flex mix 1 highlighted, now we can go up to the screen here and you'll notice that it says aux 1. And if you go into the settings, and it's just an overview, and the thing about all the outputs, every input on a PreSonus mixer gives you a 4-band full parametric EQ. All the outputs, including all the flex mixes, give you a 6-band, which is great if you're trying to ring out monitors, if you're going to use one for a monitor wedge. Plus they give you a bunch of graphic EQs that you can assign to different auxiliaries or different mixes as well. But in this case, first thing I want to do is let's go into the settings on this and just talk about a couple of these things. All right, so you hit the gear icon up here, and the first thing you got on this, 1 through 16, that's another thing that's different. I can only make it either an auxiliary or a subgroup. If I want to do a matrix, those are reserved on the 64S to just 17 through 32. Probably a computer processing thing or something. Most people don't use that many matrices. I use one, and I'll talk about how I use it. The most common way to use this is for monitors. So you're either going to have a monitor wedge or maybe somebody's going to use some in-ear monitors. And what's nice is if you have somebody that actually wants to use in-ear monitors and they want stereo left and right, since I've got the first one selected here, if I go up to the fat channel here and select the link button, you'll notice that 1 and 2 are now selected. Okay, so now you have a full stereo mix. 1 and 2 are going to go out stereo, and then you can pan things to one side or the other. You might run into that with in-ears. Generally, you won't with monitor wedges. So at this point, let's just talk about mono auxiliary outs, like we're going to set up like a speaker wedge for a monitor. So you got some options here. On every input and output, especially the flex mixes, you can name it. So let's say that the first auxiliary is for the house left guitar player. So you could put guitar left, and then that would tell you when you're mixing, okay, that's the monitor that I'm mixing for him or letting him mix or whatever. But you can name it. You do that right here. But these, I want to talk about these down here, and a lot of people don't go into these and why you would use them for certain different things, okay? Auxiliary is what you use monitors for. That's the most common. But let's talk about these pre and post modes here. Pre-1 means that this auxiliary gets its signal right after the preamp, before any EQing and before the slider, so it doesn't matter, and that's what you want because the front of house guy, usually me, I'm mixing at the front of house, and if you're guitar or vocal or whatever, I'm bringing that up in the mix. You don't want that to affect what's going on in the monitors. Now, the only thing that I've seen in some cases is pre-2 would be after the processing, like your EQing and stuff like that. If you set up a separate, like 2 of these, one for a separate monitor console, which would give you input, 2 separate input EQs and processing, one dedicated, then maybe set the monitor console up for pre-2, so whenever you EQ something now, the bass player's got a wedge, and can I get a more low end on my bass signal coming through the monitor? You can go ahead and EQ those on all the different inputs at that point. That's a pretty complicated setup. The default way I would recommend, if you're running monitors and mains and everything from one console, which the majority of everybody out there that's using these are doing that, then just leave it in pre-1. So now what's the post? If pre-2 is after the EQ, the post setting is after the fader. So why would you use that? Well, you can use auxiliaries for more than monitors. One of the most common things on old consoles, like analog consoles, is, okay, you got a bunch of auxiliaries, you don't have dedicated effects. Well, what if you want to hook up? Maybe you got a nice lexicon in the rack on the side and you want to send a signal to that. The thing about using effects, you do want that to go up and down with the main output level. So let's say you add some reverb to a vocal. If you had that set to pre-1 or 2, when you brought the volume down on the main slider, the reverb would stay up there. That'd be horrible. So when you do post, now when you bring the slider up and down on the main, whatever that auxiliary is used for, you can use it for effects. Where I use it, and I'm going to talk a little bit about running subwoofers on an auxiliary. What I do, I take my mix 32, so I got to come down here to 16 and I got to hit it twice, but I've got that set to my subwoofers. So my PA system is pretty simple. I have 2 line arrays, a left and a right, and then I have an amp rack that feeds my subwoofers that are either on the sides or across the front of the stage if it's tall enough. But that amp gets the signal from this auxiliary 32 output. So that's how my setup is. So now my choice is I can decide what's going to that subwoofer. I mean, subwoofers, you're down probably 100 hertz or lower. My subs are set at 80 hertz, between 30 and 80 hertz. So that's pretty low frequencies. And most things except kick drum, bass guitar, maybe a floor tom, a synthesizer that does, big fat analog synth sounds that have that, almost bassy sound. There's a handful of things that really are going to produce those frequencies. So now I can go in, okay, here's my kick. I want that in the sub, and I can adjust how much low end I'm getting, send it to the sub. Here's my floor toms. I got 2 of them today. So let's put a little bit of that in the sub. And then I got the bass guitar here. And then maybe my keyboard, I've got a keyboard channel here that maybe they're playing a synthesizer. So there's my things that go to the subwoofer. Nothing else is going to go to that no matter what now. And you say, okay, why does that matter if the instrument won't produce, my vocal won't produce below 100 hertz anyway? Well, guess what? If it's a windy day, the wind will. All the mics that are out there can pick up that extra noise and send that through there. And now all of your subs are getting all muddy and mushy sound, and there's just junk going through there. So running it on an auxiliary, I started doing that a while ago, and I loved it ever since. I've had a couple other local sound engineers that I helped them get set up that way, and all of a sudden their vocals sound cleaner and clearer. All of a sudden their whole mix, they've got way more flexibility. They can control more. They're getting more out of their subs because the subs aren't trying to produce all this extra noise. It's concentrating on just those things that need that low frequency. So that's why I like to do auxiliary subs. Now, to get back to this, I want that particular auxiliary post because if I'm on the main mix now and I've got the kick drum here and I start bringing it up and down, I want that same amount to go up and down in the subwoofer. So that's a reason you would set it up for post. That's the whole deal between the pre-1, 2, and the post, and different reasons why you would use it. If you're going to, like I said, set up auxiliaries on a sub, then go ahead and set that auxiliary on post. If you're going to use it, maybe you got an old vintage lexicon. Well, you can use one of these auxiliaries, send a signal to that. That's an effects, that's post. Okay? That's what that means. And you'll notice now that I've got 32, that I got another box down here. Remember I said 17 through 32, I can also make those a matrix. Let's start and talk about that. Let's save the subgroup explanation for last. So matrix. So I use a matrix, and the reason I do that is because I generally do bigger shows now where my main speakers are spread apart. So the people in the middle, like right in front of the stage, guess what? They're not hearing that. They're too far away and the speakers aren't wide enough dispersion. So I put maybe 1 or 2 speakers in the middle pointing at the crowd called center fills. All right? Well, what do I want in those center fills? I want the main left-right signal to go through those as well but I want it at a completely different level. I don't want to blast those as loud as the main speakers, just a little bit to fill that in. And in some cases, when I have like rock bands, for instance, I just did a show in Bellevue, and the band had guitar amps and the bass amp, and all the stage volume was pretty loud. I had my guy standing in the middle to fill that in. He says, yeah, he says, the problem is I'm getting so much stuff from the stage, from instruments, the vocals are a little bit weak there. So here's the benefit of using a matrix. So let me go over here. So 32 is my subs, 31 is my matrix for my center fills. And you see I labeled it center fill, set up as a matrix. What I can do now, when you set up a matrix, the first thing it does is it looks at all your outputs. So all the auxiliaries I can choose to go through there, or I can page over. And now I've got my main left and right. It ended up being right here. You can see that's turned up a little bit. And after that, then I've got my individual channels, and I've got vocals down here on 25, maybe 25, 6, 7, and 8 right down here. Well, guess what? If I need a little bit more vocal there to compensate for the stage volume from guitar amps, I can boost those up. So you can select any of these sources to send to that. So I send the main left and right. That's the main thing. And then if I need to add some more vocals, and if you hit it again, it keeps going through. I've got 62, 64, and then I've got effects returns here, auxiliary inputs, tape input, talkback mic. There's a lot of sources that you can send to on a matrix. In a church environment, matrix would be a good choice if you've got, oh, we have a spare room off to the side that's a cry room, but we got a speaker in there. All right, well, send a separate mix. Pick one of your flex mixes here, send it to a matrix, send the main left, right, but then maybe the pastor's mic or whatever, you want that to be a little louder, so you select that, and then you can create a mix from all those sources to send to there. Same thing with overflow rooms, and like I did one church that they had in the basement is where the kitchen was, and they always did a meal after service. So the people that were downstairs, okay, guess what? There's a speaker down there. We actually set up a TV monitor so they could actually, the people making the food could enjoy the service too. All right, so subgroups are probably the most complicated because you can actually do, well, let's talk about what is a subgroup, all right? A subgroup is just a grouping of a number of channels. So here's a perfect example, drums. Right now I've got 10 channels dedicated to do a drum set. Well, if I wanted to bring the whole drum set up and down, I'd have to sit here with 10 sliders and move them all at the same time. Okay, well, if you're just adjusting volume, what's cool in this is DCA groups, digitally controlled amplifiers. So let me select this. I've got a number of them set up. Okay, I've got like 7 DCA groups set up. And let me show you what it does. So let me create a dummy drum mix, all right? We got this and that, floor toms, kick and snare a little higher. So there's my drum mix for the show. So if I want to bring the drums all up or down, instead of doing this, now I can grab one slider over here, and you see what's happening over here? And I'll tell you what, let me do something a little bit weird. Now watch these when I do this. They actually move in the percentage to where they all go off at the same time. So that's how smart DCA groups work. And that's a really simple way to actually set up and have a master volume control for your drums. Why use a subgroup then? A subgroup is a submaster, and what you're going to do is instead of just having this one control these volume levels, you're actually going to route these channels through this subgroup, and the benefit of doing it that way, it's still going to give you a master control. So let me go to, I'm going to change it anyway. Let me go to 3, and now I'm going to select subgroup. First thing you notice, that's blue, turns the button to blue. Now that's my subgroup. All right, you can name it just like we've done on everything else. All right, so now what I do, if you notice with this selected, I don't see anything up here. Where do all my channels go? Well, on the PreSonus, when you push and hold that subgroup, now they show up. And they say, okay, I want to create the subgroup for the drums. So now they're all the select buttons are flashing. So let's select all the drum channels. And that's stereo. So now I've got this mix, and unlike the DCA group, my master volume for this is not adjusting this, but here's the benefit. What happens if you want to add processing to the whole drum set, like a compressor? All right? Well, guess what? Now you've got your master for that subgroup right here. If you hit this select button, you can now go add processing. You want to add a compressor? Yeah, let's add a compressor. We can do that and pick a compressor and adjust it, and all that processing gets done on this group as one thing. I think I covered what I wanted to cover, so let me just do a quick recap here. Flex mixes. You can do auxiliary, either pre or post, pre-1, pre-2, post. Just understand what you're going to use that auxiliary for and decide if you want it to be pre or post. You can do subgroups. The idea with subgroups is that you can have a master for a group of channels, and you can put processing. You can adjust levels, you can do EQing, compressors, all that kind of processing stuff on a group of channels at one. DCA groups, that's just volume, that's just controlling volumes. You can't do any processing there. And then the other thing is the matrices. If you want to send just outputs, well, that's the best thing about matrix. Just like I did with my matrix for center fill, I put the main in there, and then if I need to add some of the vocals in there to make those clearer up front, I can do that. You can take any output and any input and send it to a matrix. They're very powerful, very flexible, hence the name Flex Mix. The best thing about Flex Mixes is you got a whole bunch of them to play with. Just decide how you want to use it. Use the examples I gave you. Hey, you know, if you like these videos, I plan on doing more of these when the council's here. We're still in festival season, so it's going to be sporadic. Once we get into the fall and winter, where that season is done, I'll have it set up here, and I can do a whole series of videos on audio. So go to tegramusic.com. Oh, don't forget to subscribe if you're watching on YouTube, and follow us if you're seeing this on Facebook. We appreciate that. That really helps. Go look at our Reverb and our eBay store. We got a bunch of stuff there. And if you have a question on any of this stuff, don't hesitate to leave a comment or send me a message, and I'll try to answer it. All right, that's all I got. Enough rambling. We'll see you guys next time.